What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, Middlekauff Mailbag. At John Middlekauff. 2 F's. This is my name. Whoever thought of the at in front of all the handles and like Instagram and Twitter, that's kind of a genius. Kind of differentiates everything. From Shane, question for the bag. Last Sunday, Mahomes had a long run where he was giving himself up on the sideline, so the defensive player stopped. Then he turned up the sideline for a big gain. The defensive player would have been called for a late hit if he would have hit him because Patrick gets every one of those calls, even if he's sniffing the line. I think it's unfair for quarterbacks to get protected when it serves them, but they can take advantage of it. He should be called down the second he slows down and pretends to give himself up. Curious your take on the solution. I think Bosa, when asked about it after the game, essentially said the same thing, that it's completely unfair because these guys are taught now that you can't hit them on the sideline. It was the longest run of Mahomes' career. So I'm in total agreement. Once you get close to the sideline as a quarterback and you do that cutback, the ball should be downed because you get every other advantage. These guys slow up and don't touch you. So I'm with you. It is completely unfair to the defensive players. What are they supposed to do? Because you're right. If someone, and the 49ers safeties were hitting, what if the young safety Mustafa would have lit his world up? We know exactly what would have happened. He would have got a 15-yard penalty. Hell, he might have been thrown out of the game. So I don't blame Mahomes for doing it. You're just taking advantage. It's like telling my accountant, like, that's a loophole. Let's fucking use it. I want to keep that money. I don't want to give it away. So until they fix that loophole, it's going to continue to be used. I've heard rumors about the Vikings potentially trading for Stafford. If this to help a clear path for J.J. McCarthy when he gets back, or is there more to it with them? Well, obviously Cooper Kupp is on the trading block. The problem for Cooper Kupp is they want a really high pick because they value him a lot. And if you look at his game logs from the last 3 years, he's missed a ton of games. And he's no longer the dominant player that he once was because he's always injured. So, like, Devontae gets traded, and he goes for what? A third? Well, the last 2 years, he's got over 100 catches. And I just think even DeAndre Hopkins last year had 75 catches. Cooper Kupp injured 2 years ago. He's currently injured. I think he's coming back now. Like, he's just injured a lot. So, like, you would have to be high on crack cocaine to give a second-round pick for Cooper Kupp. And that is the reports that what people want. But I think people go, well, if Cooper Kupp's on the block and they're kind of resetting this thing, what about Matt Stafford? Well, the connection's easy because Kevin O'Connell was with the Rams with Matt Stafford, so they know each other. My question would be, it'd be pretty cutthroat that they've had all offseason, all training camp, and now all season with Darnold, and they've had success. They literally just lost their first game, which they easily could have won. So if Darnold would have been a flop, totally understand it. Just trade for him, figure it out later. I think sometimes in the NFL, more than these other sports, you just live in the moment. Because you're not really, especially if you're Kevin O'Connell and you're Flores and you have this team, it's like, could we make the NFC Championship game? You're not worried about J.J. McCarthy's feelings or what are we going to, we'll figure that out when we come to it. What's the worst case scenario? Matt Stafford starts for us next year and JJ backs him up. And if Stafford gets hurt, JJ just comes in. So I think it would be one of the Stafford's a better player than Sam Darnold, obviously. But like it's kind of working. And to me, this is where Tomlin gets a lot of credit. He knew his locker room. He knew Fields wasn't good enough as a passer. And while Russell is not as good as he once was, is way better than Fields at throwing the go route and the ability to get Pickens involved. And that clearly changed their offense, which then opens up their run game, which the running backs are healthy and they slice and dice the Jets. But like, if you did make this move, you would have to acknowledge, yeah, I don't think the guys love Sam Darnold, which definitely doesn't feel the case. Like, that's not Sam Darnold's MO. People like the guy. So that would be totally would get it if you were 3-3. It's like we need a spark. I think it would be pretty, and I get it's pro sports, but I'd be I'd be a little surprised if that happened. I haven't looked at the obviously Stafford makes a ton of money. Do you know what I think the Rams want to do? I think they want to blow it up. So they can they've already kind of reset it with a lot of younger players. Their defense is really young. Draft a quarterback and kind of pivot. The problem is McVay's so good, it would be hard for them ever to win like 3 or 4 games. Like they'll always end up winning 6 or 7, even in worst case scenario. It's clear Kyle is having a down year, but something that isn't talked about much is how many offensive coaches he has lost since he's been a head coach of the 49ers. Do you think that is affecting his game planning and calls? Well, I think part of being a young star head coach, McVay, Kyle, LaFleur, is you are going to lose a lot of coaches, especially when your staff is young. And the one thing Kyle had is a lot of young dudes. They were his dudes. Slowick, Kubiak, Mike McDaniel, right? LaFleur's brother who went with Saleh. Like these aren't like 60-year-old retreads. Like these are young, hungry guys itching to become OCs. So like you get to mold those guys and do everything you want, and they become reflections of you. And when you lose those guys, like you're gonna miss every once in a while, right? You're gonna hire a guy to take over for McDaniel or to take over for Slowick, who might not be as good. It's human nature. If you hire 10 straight people, some are going to be better than others, even if you're great at hiring, just based on the candidate pool. And the other thing with a candidate pool is like a lot of guys maybe he would want are under contract and he doesn't have access to because he's not hiring you to call plays. He can give you titles, passing game coordinator, run game coordinator, quarterback coach, assistant head coach, but like I can't steal anyone if I'm not making you a coordinator. So, which he's not because he's the play caller. Uh, I do think though, yeah, I don't know how to quantify that. Like it's hard to put a tangible value on what that means one way or the other. But I think Kyle's has been bad in the red zone. Like, is he just having kind of an off year? Is his offense a little out of sync? Is it all tied together? Um, I think it's very, very possible. But at the end of the day, you're the boss. It's on you. Like Andy Reid lost a lot of coaches. Belichick lost a lot of dudes. Like you get paid all that money for a reason. Jim Harbaugh's lost a shitload of coaches over the last 15 years. Same with John. I mean, they get paid a lot of money for a reason. It's on you to figure it out. It's the hard part about being the boss. Question for the bag. Big, big Vikings fan. What do you think that Vikings should do with Sam Darnold, who has played at an elite level 4 out of the first 5 games? I Elite would be a little strong for the Lions game. I would go elite level the first 3. I would say the Jets game, not. And I would say the Lions game, like really good quarterback play. I wouldn't go elite, but I hear what you're saying. I know we are only going into week 7 of the season, but you mentioned with Coward that teams do these conversations very early. Well, think about it. Like, whatever business you're in, you kind of always talk about everything. You talk about short term, you talk about long term. You're just constantly having these conversations. I've said it and I'll say it again. The conversations that like the GM and his scouts would have, or the scouts and the offensive coordinator have in their offices today, aren't that much different than the ones you and I would have if we just cracked a couple beers, watched the game tonight. I don't even know what game's on tonight. Not the, I guess the NBA starting tonight, but just bullshitting about football. Like it's the same things. Like, what do we think about Sam? Right? What should we keep him next year? Like, what do you think? Like, is JJ going to be ready? Like, you're constantly having those conversations. It's just they have the power to extend them, not extend them. That's back to the question about Stafford. That the only way they would trade for Stafford is because their belief in Sam is nowhere near as high as the way he's played, and they think it's smoke and mirrors. Of course, we drafted McCarthy, but my argument is that letting Sam Darnold walk and saving 30 or 40 million off the cap doesn't guarantee JJ will play at an elite level in 25, especially coming off a season-ending injury and taking the field for the first time in non-preseason action at the highest level of football. It seems risky to me to go that route. I personally would sign Darnold if he keeps up even 80% of this level. I'm kind of with you. I think a lot is going to be determined about obviously how he plays in November and December, and then what he looks like in the playoffs. Because let's be real, if you guys win the division and win a playoff game and are in the NFC Championship game, even if he just plays okay in that game and you lose, you're just going to get rid of him for a rookie. Now, also, like, what's his price point? Like, do we get a Daniel Jones contract? He's making $10 million this year. So if he plays, like, what are his numbers right now? Sam Darnold. He is, so through, you guys had a bye. How many games you guys played? Week 7. So there's 7 games possible. So you guys have played 6 because you're 5-1. He's got 12 touchdowns and 5 picks. So let's say he ends the season and he is 66%, which is, I would say, pre-softness of the NFL is closer to 60. Like, he's not, I wouldn't call him Mr. Accurate, though he's made some big time throws. Let's say he throws 30 touchdowns this year and has 11 picks. What is the likelihood next year of JJ McCarthy doing that? Right? Who's essentially just going to be a rookie. Played in a couple, was it 2 preseason games or just 1? He did make some sweet plays in the first preseason game he played, but the chances that a guy who's never played in the NFL in regular season games is going to throw 30 or have the ability to throw 30 plus touchdowns feels pretty extreme, especially factoring in I'm watching Caleb throw a bunch of touchdowns or Jaden Daniels throw a bunch of touchdowns. Well, it's like, yeah, in college, they were asked, carry my ass. Chuck that bad boy around. Like, they were used to playing like that. Where Sam's kind of the opposite. He comes in playing like Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019. Manage the game, brother. So, I think the thing with talking about this stuff, and people get so up in arms. Like, you said this, now you're taking it back. Like, yeah, all this shit's fluid. Things change by the week, by the month. It's like stocks. This is a stock market on grass. Things go up and things go down. And right now his stock is clearly up. But the reason like Apple or Google or some Costco, like, they're up forever, right? They have some downturns, but for the majority, you invest in them over the last 10 years, they go up. Same thing with like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Like, with guys like this, there's still a lot of unknown. Did he just turn around his career? He's going to be a good player. I like him. Now, would I sign him to the Daniel Jones contract today? Probably not. But you would also risk, like, what if the season ends and he throws 34 touchdowns and you are the number 1 seed? How much does it cost then? Are we talking like 2 in numbers? Is that what he would get on the open market? Is that what the Raiders or a team like that, Seattle, like, who would pay him? So it gets very risky. They're in a good spot in the short term because they got Sam Darnold, right? And they drafted a quarterback. But they're in a weird spot in the long term because the dude they drafted needed some work. Even if he wasn't playing, like, practice would have been huge for him. Hurt his knee, out for the season. And this player is not under contract. Now, I'd have to text around, like, I guess worst case, if you got into a pint, you could franchise him. The NBA is finally back. A new season means new ways to get into the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who's draining threes from beyond the arc? Who's hit the boards, getting rebounds? Get behind your favorite players on prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. First time, new DraftKings customers bet $5 to win $200 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Do you think Oklahoma could hire Joe Brady as their offensive coordinator? He will always play second fiddle to Josh Allen in Buffalo, but if he could turn around Oklahoma's shit show of an offense and have them competing next year, he would get 100% of the credit. Well, here's the thing. In the NFL, if you're an offensive coordinator with a star quarterback, that job is better than any offensive coordinator job in college. I've always thought every NFL job, even the worst ones, are better than college jobs. Like Ohio State, Texas, you name it, are better than the Jags. I think with money, I think it's changed a little bit. Like you could argue the Ohio State job, the Texas job, now the Georgia job, what Alabama had was Saban forever, is a better job than the Jags, is a better job than the Raiders. So we could argue on what that number is, but there are definitely some college jobs that I would understand. Like I would rather have the Ohio State job than that job. But if I'm going to be a coordinator at both spots, being the coordinator for Josh Allen is better than any coordinator job in college. Every freaking one. And honestly, it's not close. Because if I stay with Josh Allen and we win like we're doing, and we get hot in the playoffs and we're in the AFC Championship game, or we make the Super Bowl, or hell, we win one, my career's changed forever and I'm going to be head coach in the NFL and have my pick of the litter in college. So I think the question mark is, would you hire Joe Brady? I saw Venables is, listen, this is a season from hell. Like, it ain't going to change. They have too many injuries. Talking to my guy on the sideline, well, he was on the sideline. I was up against the wall because your boy didn't have sideline passes for the game. Didn't want to ask. Wasn't trying to, a lot going on. Like, the injuries they've had are insane. So I think Venables gets next year to kind of prove, like, you know, he's had 2 of 3 losing seasons. Last year was good, but his first year and obviously this year are a disaster. Why couldn't Joe Brady be the head coach there? I mean, assuming he even wants to mess around with college. But I don't think you leave for a college offensive coordinator job if you're an NFL offensive coordinator job with Josh Allen as your quarterback. Especially with the defensive head coach. Like, you get a lot of leeway in that situation. Big Packer fan. I am loving the gunslinging style of Love. It's possible he's going to break my heart in the playoffs with an untimely pick, but for now, I'm enjoying his just let it rip style of play, especially after the more cautious, risk-adverse style of Aaron, in his later years at least. Obviously, turning over the ball is not ideal, but do you think there's a tide turning in the NFL regarding interceptions? I know you're a guy who likes to swing big in life. Is it throwing more interceptions over the course of the season if you're also constantly pushing the ball down the field as opposed to more conservative dink and dunk play? I think no one has a problem with interceptions as a coaching staff if you're also making a lot of explosive plays and scoring a lot of touchdowns. So interceptions kill you in the red zone. I would say an interception in the red zone, as Rich Gannon once said on a broadcast, not my words, that he was told by a coach. He didn't give the coach's name. It's fair to assume it's when he was on the Raiders. Might not even have been a head coach, so it might not have been Gruden. That throwing a pick in the red zone is the equivalent of a baby dying. And so on my other podcast that I had for years with Guy Haberman, we used to call it the baby zone. That when you throw a pick, you know, in the baby zone, it's a problem. And again, not my words. He said it on CBS that I think it was during a Raiders game, or might have been during a Niner game when Jimmy Garoppolo threw a pick in the red zone. But to me, red zone picks are bad. They are killers. But like when you're just driving and you're letting it rip, and I can live with it. I also think the timing of interceptions, right? I think there's a time and place. If it's a second quarter and it's 10-14 and I'm fucking just freelancing and making plays, like I can live with it. In the fourth quarter of a tie game or a game where I'm down three and there's 6 minutes left and this might be one of my last possessions, I do need to be more cautious. But I can always handle picks when you're throwing a lot of touchdowns. Like if you say, hey, he threw 14 interceptions, wasn't there a big difference? It's like, well, he only threw 18 touchdowns. Or it's like, yeah, he threw 38 touchdowns. It's like these things aren't equal. And I think that's a huge part of like part of with the dink and dunk style, like you're just not going to score as many points. I feel like for the most part, the Packers are a threat to score 30 points in every game. And that's with him turning the ball over. I think one thing the gunslinging style is throwing the ball over the middle willy nilly is, I would imagine, something that drives LaFleur nuts. Every once in a while, you get tricked on a pick, on an out route, and a guy playing zone, then he's playing man, or you think he's in man, the underneath guy drops in the zone. Like, okay, it's football. It's hard. I mean, those guys drive big cars or nice cars and live in big houses too. To me, some of the picks he throws over the middle of the field, I we got to be a little cautious because when you do play a great team, like you're playing the Lions in a tie game, that could be the difference, and that's the difference why you don't win the division. Or I haven't looked at your schedule, but like how many great defenses you play. Let's pull them up really quick. The Green Bay Packers. So you play the Jaguars this week. Then you play the Lions. That's a pretty big game at Lambeau. Then you go to Chicago. That's a big game. Then you play the 49ers. It's a big game. Dolphins. We'll see if Tua can resurrect them, but you guys are way better than them. Then you go at Detroit, at Seattle, Saints stink, end with at Minnesota versus the Bears. So I think in these divisional games, like you guys still control your own destiny. You guys can still win the division. You can still be the number one seed in the conference. You're actually in great shape, even though it's weird. Like you guys technically are in third place in the division. I guess you lost to Minnesota at home, but you get them again. And I actually think you guys are pretty built to play in a dome. So right now you've only played the one divisional game. Yeah, I like gunslingers, but I do think there's a time and a place. And like you said, like what Rodgers was doing later on in his career, one, it was, a lot of people sneaky criticize him, like, Aaron, you can take some shots here, but it was working and you guys were winning. But then he got in the playoffs sometimes, like, Aaron, you kind of got to let it rip. Lifelong Broncos fan here. Should fans be worried about Peyton's offense? It looks so simple at times, and I believe he has the lowest motion rate in the NFL by a long shot. Are his times of being a premier offensive mind over? I would say I can't judge him last year, so I'm going to throw away last year. And I said this, if you listen to the podcast after the Thursday night game, you guys knew after the preseason night, so I'm guilty. Sometimes I get excited. I was like, God, Bo looks good. And then I've been a little disappointed in the regular season. I actually think for the most part, he's been below average. Like you said, they're not asking him to do much. And I even thought in that Saints game, it's like, God, he has series where it's like, is this the biggest project you've ever seen? It looks like he's processing slow. It just looks off, which is weird. No one in the history of college football has started more games. And it's not like he played at UC Davis and some small school in Texas. I mean, this guy started at Auburn and then Oregon. So, like, basically, the overwhelming majority of his conference games for 5 years mattered a lot. I mean, this guy's played in massive games from the Iron Bowl against LSU, against DeBoer in Washington, against Utah. Like, this guy's been playing real teams for a long time in front of millions of people and massive crowds. And then you watch him in the NFL, he's an older player, and you're like, Listen, I understand why they did it, but I know a lot of people that were not that high on Bo Nix. And I know a lot of people that think Sean Payton, he's pretty arrogant. And he said over and over, we think we got the best quarterback in the draft. And so far watching, like, I actually think the quarterback has limited. Now, it's football. It's hard. He's not as physically gifted Like there's a reason the other guys went 1 and 2. Caleb and Jaden are freak talents. I mean, Caleb is, I mean, his arm is, whew, and Jaden's arm. Obviously, Jaden's thinner than Caleb, taller, but so fast. And Caleb's a great athlete, strong, but a really good athlete. Bo's a good athlete, really good athlete. Arms, a little hit or miss. Accuracy looks a little off. So I just think he's got a project on his hands. If Bo was playing well and his offense you thought was stagnant in the motion rate, then yeah. But I think they're just trying to get some momentum with Bo Nix, who just, again, I mean, I'm the guy that was like, hey, 14-1 offensive rookie of the year. Your boy might have put a couple $100 on it. Looks, I mean, I lost. I might as well have just burned that money. Sometimes you just can't overthink things. I think it turns out the value preseason, and some people I'm sure listening to this might have jumped on it, was Jaden Daniels. Because Caleb was like basically 1.5-1. So if you put $100, you win 150. Jaden was like 5-1. But I'm a value investor. Problem value investor. Sometimes your money disappears. Huge Seattle fan. I was curious your thoughts were on Geno moving forward. I feel like McDonald will get his defense rolling, and there's no way you pay Geno what quarterbacks go for in the offseason. What do you do if you're John Schneider? Well, I mean, I think Sam Darnold's name has come up. Would you just go for the younger player? Right? Sam is 27. What's Geno? Let's just hypothetically, in a world that said you could pay them both the same, Geno is 34 years old. So you have like a 7-year age difference. And Geno actually turns 35. God, he's older than you think. I guess he just turned 34. I was like October 10th, but that just happened. So Geno next year will be 35. He has been, I give John Schneider a lot of credit. It's one of the best bridge quarterback signings I can remember in a long time. I mean, it truly is. Usually when teams sign guys like Geno Smith, it is such a disaster. It is so embarrassing. It just immediately pisses off all the fans. Everyone knows the guy sucks, and he typically gets benched. And Geno has just been freaking fantastic for them. I mean, he really has. But you're right. This is a business. And clearly Geno wanted to get paid this offseason. Don't blame him, because in his mind, it's like, look at what I've done for your franchise. I've helped keep it afloat. And it's like, well, Geno, I watch you play against Atlanta. Where's that guy when we play the 49ers? Like the guy that I just saw 2 weeks ago, what the hell was that? And I think the games against the 49ers, I think he's 0-6. He was 0-5 coming into this season, and you lost that Thursday night game, so he's 0-6. He has been atrocious in those games. And listen, you're like, if you're not Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Rodgers in his prime, you get some bad games. Like it's, even the middle of the road crew, like they're better middle of the road, but the Cousins, the Goffs, the Daks, the guys that make a lot of money that we all acknowledge, even though Goff's like kind of having an MVP season, but they've never been like top 5 quarterbacks. They have stinkers. But I think the problem with Geno is age. Um, it feels like he puts a ceiling on your team. Like, are you going to win? And part of the Niners thing reflects like, can we win playoff games with you? And it doesn't feel like the answer is yes. And let's say you win the division this year, because it's very possible with the Niners having a lot of problems. Let's say you win the division this year. If you lost that playoff game, I think Geno would be done. Now, I think the question mark would be, would they trade up and try to land someone? Is this quarterback class something that would intrigue John? I don't know. A fascinating quarterback team. Really is. It's a long question. Do you think divisional realignment in college football will improve the success rate of first-round quarterbacks or reduce the likelihood of drafting busts? Where in previous years, top programs like Ohio State, Bama, etc., had only a couple top 15 games on the schedule. The consolidation of power in the SEC and Big Ten now forces more NFL-like matchups. This is a fantastic point here. This is a good question. A lot of successful college quarterbacks loaded college rosters flopped in the NFL. Now, take Georgia and Texas game, for example. We already are writing off Ewers and Beck as mid round picks after disappointing performances against other elite defenses. Curious if better talent parity will help teams make more informed draft decisions. In fairness to years before, on a lot of these busts, like if you had 2 years as a starter and you're a potential top five pick, like if you play at Bama or USC or Texas or whatever, I can only go off the 3 or 4 games that you played against like other loaded teams. Right. So it was a huge, huge projection always. And now, like Carson Beck's playing in massive games. I mean, he's already played, I would say, 2 NFL level games on the road at Alabama, on the road at Texas. Like there can't be a better way to evaluate you. The pressure, the intensity. I know, I don't know exactly how many NFL guys Bama has on defense, but for as crappy as their defense is, I bet still a lot of guys end up getting drafted. Obviously, Texas has a bunch of NFL guys defensively. And it's like they're going to get more of those. And now with the 12-team playoffs as well. So I think you bring up a great point that any player I want to evaluate that's at one of these SEC or Big Ten schools, they're just playing in so many big games against other NFL teams, against other teams, even random games. Like, oh, you get Iowa this week, and I'm a linebacker. Well, it's like, well, they got a starting running back that's going to be a, I don't know, top 100 pick. That before, like, or the UCLA middle linebacker. I don't even know if they have one. I'm just using this as an example. That game never would have happened. UCLA would have been playing like Arizona State, right? Or Utah, or just whatever. Utah's got NFL players, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think it 100% helps for sure. So maybe there will be less draft busts. Maybe, here's the thing. Maybe it's more likely that these guys don't get drafted as high. I think that's the thing. That instead of Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck in years past, where, like, let's face it, if Texas was playing in the Big 12, they would destroy everybody. And then you would get to the playoffs and you would put an extraordinary amount of pressure on the playoff games. And then if he didn't have a good Final Four game, you would chalk it up. Well, he's had one bad game. It was a big moment. But you would go back, look at his numbers. Well, it turns out that game against Georgia in the Final Four, I'm assuming no realignment here, Texas still in the Big 12. Well, it's like, that's a one-off situation. Well, no, actually, that is indicative of the guy less than playing Baylor in Oklahoma State on a weekly basis. So 100%. And I do think it's going to really help a lot of guys out. It's like, damn, look at that guy play. Like you watched, I'll tell you who made a lot of money. You watch Walker from Georgia. Holy shit. Like, and you get more eyeballs on them because you play well in the bigger games. More people are paying attention. Hype's great. And listen, hype, real or not, matters. But it can dissipate and disappear quick because when you play good teams, it can just be like, what's going on here? Like, what's happening? And I think we are all huge winners. Seeing some of the ratings numbers on college football, it's pretty crazy. I mean, some of the biggest games this year, Georgia, Texas, Bama, Georgia. I mean, these games are doing like 12, 11 million people. Like good regular season NBA games do like a couple million people. The World Series this year is unique because it's Dodgers, Yankees, but never do those type numbers anymore. Hell, the NBA Finals the last couple of years are doing like 9, 10 million. And that's like Warriors, Celtics. So props to everyone for realignment. It has made the sport more interesting, even if I missed the Pac-12 a little bit. Appreciate everyone listening. Talk soon.